Because of my dad's illness, and after he died, my mother went back to work and school at the same time. I had a great deal of freedom, of periods of time when I was pretty much left on my own to do what I wanted to do. And if I knew I had those periods coming, I would spend time plotting out what I would do with that freedom, who I would hang out with, what I could do that I couldn't do if mom was around, what I could get into, what I could eat, what I could drink, what I could watch, where I could go. Oftentimes, I spent so much time planning that when those times came, they passed before I got anything done that at least was fun. And even when I did, I oftentimes paid a price for it. And then there were those times where I totally ignored all the advice, all the rules, all the things that I had grown up knowing were wrong, and went precisely and did them, and paid consequences, heavy consequences in some cases. I often remember coming home later as an adult, and my mother would greet me and say, I knew more of what you got into than you think I did. And the response in my head was, no, you don't, Mom, because I'd be dead. I got myself in some pretty sticky messes. It was that balance of freedom and responsibility, of consequences, that I struggled with when I got the freedom of my own car. What did it mean to be able to go anywhere? But then there were all those bills too. The same thing happened when I went away to college. Suddenly I was free of parental supervision. I could do what I wanted to do. And then I managed to live together with 30 other guys in a fraternity and learned there was responsibility in community. It is that tension that we struggle with. Our freedom and our responsibility to one another. That really is a difficult challenge for us as human beings, and we manage to screw it up more often than we get it right. I think it's why the New Testament spends so much time dealing with that particular issue in a variety of different ways, in different genres. We have in the Gospels stories of Jesus being confronted by the Pharisees about his responsibility to the Torah, the law. And how does that fit with Jesus' good news that we are set free by the grace of God? And so we have these confrontations over things like Sabbath and healing and doing things on the Sabbath, or kosher cleanliness, or kosher eating. And Jesus tries to hold that tension or redefine that tension that has somehow gotten out of balance, where it was heavy on the law and not on the gift of God. The flip side of that happens in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, where they understand that they have been set free from the law by the grace of God, and so they no longer need the law. They no longer need to be responsible to one another. And they manage to get into their own sense of trouble in how they live together. The letter to James reminds us that the grace of God, the good news, is worthless if it doesn't have an impact on how we live with one another. What good is grace if we cannot live that out in our works, in our relationships, in the way we treat one another? Luther used a term in his theology called law and gospel. And it is that tension that he saw us as human beings struggle so mightily with, and particularly in the church. Once again, from Luther's perspective, the balance had come skewed. And it was again heavy on the law. And so Luther spends a great deal of time preaching about the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, which says to us, God has loved you so much that he is willing to sacrifice everything, including life, that you might know that you have a right relationship with God, that he comes to you as a free gift and can't be screwed up. You can't mess this one up because it's not about you. It's about God. And God has decided to love you unconditionally. Despite what you think of yourselves or despite what others say about you. It comes as a free gift. And the law then, those things that call us into community and responsibility, are on the one hand those very things that drive us to the mercy of God, because we screw up pretty often in our lives together. And so we come before God in confession and forgiveness for the things we've done and things we've left undone. That's one of the functions of the law. Another function of the law is how do we live together? It gives us a fence, which was the original intention of Torah, the law of Moses, was to give the people of God a boundary in which to live in healthy ways. A way to live together that brings life and not death. That tension I feel a lot these days. On the one hand, we love freedom, but we think we deserve that freedom. Whereas that freedom actually comes to us as a gift from our ancestors. We did nothing but inherit the freedoms that we enjoy. And at the same time, we have others that want to really ratchet down the law in a way to coerce, control, manipulate. So what does the good news of law and gospel have to say to us in 21st century America in these troubled times? I think it calls us to remember perspective and the tension inherent in our lives together under God. A God who loves and cares for us and calls us to live together in a way that reflects that same kind of love. Jesus continually reminds us it's twofold. It is the love of God and the love of neighbor. And we would do well as we move forward in these troubled times to keep that perspective.